Hello everyone, welcome and welcome back. I appreciate you being here. I do appreciate those who make it through my videos. They are a little bit lengthy sometimes, but there's a lot of great information provided throughout, and it is definitely one of those things I'm really working towards raising the awareness. So I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you making it through the end of videos that I record. So to start, I only speak for myself. I say this in every video because I want it to be known I only speak for myself, from my experience. I always implore everybody that might get any kind of content, whether it be this or something else, to make sure you do your fact checks, do your own research, and make sure that what the person is saying to you is actually true. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. Liking says that there's value. Subscribing, you'll get updates on when I post more videos, and it helps with the algorithm for others who might be looking for content like this. Share so that maybe if you don't need it, somebody you know will get a hold of it, or someone they know will get a hold of it and they might need it. And then comment, let me know what you think, how you feel, share your own experiences. Let's raise the awareness together. I can't know what's needed if I'm not told what's needed, so please feel free to comment. I do respond to comments to the best of my ability. So in my most recent video, I actually recorded just before this one. I gave myself a breather because it was a very hard thing to record, but in that video it's going to be a part of the silenced words spoken series, or I can't remember what it's called. I don't know, but it's the series, and then it's No Justice in the Courtroom. And this is kind of the partner to that, or the subsequent statement to that. So in that video, I read a social media post that I had written to try to, if nothing else, raise the awareness of just what was happening and the injustice, and to energetically stand in solidarity against abuse, not only abuse perpetrated by an individual like my abuser, but the abuse of power, the abuse of politics, the abuse of money that is enabled, not just possible or probable, but enabled, at least in the United States, and from what I've heard and the research I've done, is pretty much everywhere. So I had written that social media post. I had friends and family post it on my behalf. And then when I actually went to the preliminary hearing and got my opportunity to speak as a victim under the Victims' Rights Act, which throughout this process was violated multiple times as it relates to me, and there was really nothing I could do about it, I got the opportunity to speak. And I wasn't gonna at least go down without using the one thing that I was gifted, and that was my life and my voice. And so I'm going to read my dismissal objection statement. So if you didn't watch the other video, the DA's office in this particular court is highly corrupt, and they, after 18 months of me fighting, like upcharging, getting a plea rejected twice, upcharging to a felony, all that stuff, whatever, decided that there was no guaranteed win, and therefore they weren't going to go to trial. So my abuser was, the single only charge he was ever charged with was dismissed. His record was sealed. So his attempted murder of me, he never got any accountability for it or anything else. So in this preliminary hearing, I wrote a statement for it, and that's the statement I'm going to read. Now, I do obfuscate names because I have to, but that's all that's been changed, and locations, because I can't say anything identifiable without them coming after me. So this one's going to be hard. I'll tell you, the last video I just recorded, I noted that my neck and chest went from white, because I'm very, very pale, to very blotchy and red. I was very warm, and then I was very cold afterwards, which is why I'm now wearing a sweater, even though it's literally like 105 degrees already outside, and it's only 9:20 in the morning. Likely to be a 115 degree day. So it's gonna be hard. to read this, but I'm gonna read it anyway, and then I'll tell you what happened in the hearing afterwards. All right. Don't be stupid. If I'm going to hit you, I'm not going to hit you in the face. I'll hit you in the back of your head so no one can see the bruises. Truer words were never spoken by Mr. Abuser, as he would go on to do just that less than a year later. A blow to the back of the head as I stumbled, beaten, bloodied, and bruised down an empty driveway, which would knock me unconscious for a final time on the evening of my 34th birthday, August 1st, 2022. No one's going to believe you. Just take your pills, crazy. Yet another statement he would always inevitably follow with when I would speak out against his abuse, declaring that one day he would be held accountable. And while there are far more standing with me than I ever thought there would be, he was not wrong in knowing within himself that he would once again bear no consequence for his actions. That such acts of violence as beating physically inferior women, a physically inferior woman unconscious, child abuse to a 5-year-old autistic child, verbal assault to a young woman trying to save a friend, multiple bond condition violations, and nearly a dozen protection order violations, including stalking and harassment, all of which supported by hard evidence provided to the DA's office in near real time, would be seen as nothing compared to his untouchable privilege. On this day, February 12, 2024, despite my countless unanswered requests for an ethical explanation for the lack of action being taken against a habitual offender of the law, the District Attorney's Office of the blank Judicial District unsurprisingly moves to dismiss the only charge against him. There is, however, one outstanding question that must be answered and will be answered by me today in this statement. Who does and will actually suffer the consequences of Mr. Abuser's heinous actions? Please allow me to answer. I do and will, as I continue to treat my physical and psychological injuries from not only that night, but the 10 years of abuse prior and the 18 months of fighting for justice since. My young son does and will, as he will always remember watching his daddy mercilessly beat his mommy yet again before he sat next to her body believing her to be dead. My young daughter does and will, as she remembers seeing the bruises all over her mother's face and body after she fled to her home state, bruises she directly stated at only 11 years old didn't surprise her. Miss Guardian Angel does and will, as she will always remember lying over top my lifeless body to stop Mr. Abuser from continuing his beating as he turned to then verbally assault her. My mother and sister do and will, as they will always remember driving to the state I was in, helping me load our pets, one of which almost dead herself, and our belongings in black trash bags to bring us back home. My incredible partner, whom I have known since childhood, and my friends of years to decades do and will, as they have stood with me in the call for justice, which will once again go unanswered. Countless others do and will, as they'll never forget the bruises they saw and the explanation they heard when they did what they could to support a mother and her children starting life over once more. Victims of the past do, as their sacrifices seemingly have done nothing to right this broken system. Current and future victims do and will, as they stay in the cycle because they know it to be true that their cries for justice will be suffocated. And finally, the community does and will, as Mr. Abuser continues to manipulate their good graces, abuse their intrinsic beauty, and steal from their environment, a community unaware that he actively seeks his next opportunity to take advantage of another victim, a tactic of progression that Mr. Abuser knows all too well, which not only repeatedly gets him what he wants quickly, but for which he will never himself face any long-term consequences, a short-term risk that for him is always worth the reward. And while Mr. Abuser will leave this courtroom seeing this as a win once again, it should be known that such abuse of the defenseless for personal gain is nothing but a fool's errand in the eyes of the universe. It never forgets, and it doesn't forgive. May the universe only show you the mercy you've earned. I will conclude my statement with a quote by Theodore Roosevelt. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. I am that man in the arena, and I always will be. I have not once neither sat to rest nor turned my back and walked out. I will leave this hearing knowing I have done everything I can to protect myself, my family, and others, while those with the authority for justice have merely spectated from the stands. As I move forward, I will stand tall above the tree line from the highest of mountains and scream into the void, patiently waiting for the call back. Because while others accept they will neither know victory nor defeat, because they failed to even try, I will never stop fighting to turn victims into survivors. End of statement. So, I read that statement, and at the time, I had actually worked to get a nonprofit attorney and a nonprofit victims advocate to support me. Now, to be clear, when I say to support me, they're really just kind of there to be emotionally supportive, which is incredibly helpful. It meant a lot to me, and to kind of interpret the law or what's happening for those who may not understand. I didn't get this attorney. I didn't even know that they existed, which is a really good thing. If you are about to go through this or going through this, there are likely nonprofit law offices, attorneys that are there for victim support. I implore you to look those up and try to get that support. The thing is that needs to be known, though, is you, as a victim of a violent crime, if you are, or your family member, loved one, whatever, you really don't have a say in anything. So you can influence, and then depending on where you are, there might be like laws that have to be followed in terms of like before a plea is offered, you have to be informed. You have to be told. You don't really get a say. Now, I was heavily involved in my case. I provided an incredible amount of evidence that I had pulled myself. I had provided all of my medical records. Like, I literally was in lockstep with the DA's office and giving them stuff before they even asked for it. And I had an adult witness. It was all there. And it didn't matter. The DA, after the prosecutor literally interrogated me, which in itself was a victim's rights violation, and even my advocate was furious, and he was actually wrong in his accusations, and I was able to prove in real time that his accusations were incorrect, and they were documented as such, but he didn't back down, right? In his mind, I don't even know what was going on with him, because he was over here supporting, we're going to get justice, he's going to be held accountable. Even had a personal situation where he had lost, I believe, a great niece or something like that to her father murdering her, right? So he had this understanding, and we were on the same page, and I go to meet with him, and suddenly he's accusing me of lying and being unethical and all of these things. Doesn't actually know the facts of the case after he said he did know the facts of the case. And I was like, but those aren't the facts. It's literally in this record right here. So I'm literally having to have this, I don't even know, like this verbal spar with this prosecutor who's supposed to be protecting victims, and having to prove to him that he's wrong and that he doesn't know the facts of the case. So this happens, and then after it all, the DA's office ends up dismissing, right? So that's how we get to this hearing. Now, I will note, if you want to talk about some really fucked up corruption and obvious corruption, there were so many ways that I caught them up in shit, and they didn't do anything. I literally had a meeting with the district attorney for over an hour, and I asked him all these questions. I caught him up, and he literally just couldn't respond appropriately. Even my nonprofit attorney that was on the line with me, it was in the meeting, my nonprofit advocate, my advocate that worked for the court, they were all there, and they were all saying how ridiculous and unethical it was. And it continued. And so that's how we ended up getting, and then he actually ended up leaving his position merely like a month after he dismissed it. So it was either that he was like, you know what? I want to end my term early, and to take on this case, I'd actually have to just keep working. Or he saw the writing on the wall, but had already moved to dismiss and was like, oh shit, I better drop this real quick, get out before I get hit for corruption. Because he already had a history of corrupt behavior. And the defense attorney that I will get into for my abuser was actually tried and found guilty for tampering with evidence in a murder trial merely a few years before that. How this guy was still able to practice as an attorney, a criminal defense attorney, blows my effing mind. He literally withheld evidence, crucial evidence, in a murder trial, then was tried in that state. I can't remember. It's like the state level of the state court or something like that. Literally found guilty of withholding evidence in a murder trial, and is still practicing law as an attorney, as a criminal defense attorney, and was my abuser's attorney. Okay, so that's how fucking fucked this is. And so we get to this hearing, this preliminary hearing, where I read this statement, and this is what happened next. The chances of something like that being rejected by a judge are pretty small in this state, because there isn't a lot of wiggle room for the judge. This is the other fucked up thing. You have a judge that might want to do the right thing, but legally can't, because the way the statutes are written, the way the law is written, the law, if you go through Black's law, if you go through it, the law is written to support abusers, to support perpetrators. You have these criminals, these people who end up going to jail or prison for really fucking petty crimes. I met a guy at the court who had just gotten out of prison. He had been in prison for like 40 years. And very, very nice gentleman. And we're talking about it, and he ends up telling me that he's been in prison for over 40 years for drug offenses from when he was like 19 years old. 19. And this guy's in prison for over 40 years. But then you have someone who's literally like a repeat offender of the law, a repeat DV perpetrator, documented, who almost murders someone. But guess what? He's got privilege, and his daddy's got money, and they have really big ties to this community. And and it just so happens that all these people who really shouldn't be practicing law are able to practice law. And the laws are there to protect this shit. So what happens? So I read this statement, and you think, okay, well, I read my statement, it moves on. Oh, no. No. The defense attorney, the judge asks for the district attorney to explain what's happening, because one of the other parts of the law is she can't see it, or he can't see it. The judge can't really see it until it's kind of like proceeding to trial. So the amount of information the judge has to even make a ruling is limited, because they're not allowed to see the evidence. They're not allowed to see everything that happens. So, because somehow that makes a neutral, right? So you're basically just at the will of a district attorney and a criminal defense attorney, and hoping that they're not in cahoots together, or they haven't been paid off by someone, or they have ulterior motives or whatever. It's just like this blind trust scenario, which, with how much corruption there is in the world and how much corruption I literally observed through this entire thing, there is absolutely no trust there. So the judge asks the defense or the district attorney what's going on. The district attorney gives extremely high-level information that doesn't even allude to the fact that there was an adult witness present, or all of the evidence that's available. Never goes into the violations, never goes into any of that, right? So literally doesn't even give enough information for a judge to make an informed decision. But here's what happens next. Whatever I said in my statement, or maybe this guy is just a hardcore douchebag that uses his position as a defense attorney to just be an abuser himself, which actually is really common. He literally goes on the defensive. Now, mind you, again, the chances of this getting rejected are pretty small. There's a chance, but it's pretty small. He goes on the defensive and literally starts basically defending my abuser. But here's the crazy shit. He lies. And it not lies of like difference of opinion. Lies as in lies. Literally, like, never mentions that there's a witness, says all of these things that happen that's not documented anywhere, or things that are documented saying those things didn't happen. Literally paints me out to be something that I'm quite literally not, that you can see in the documentation. Omits super pertinent information and just zeroes in on creating this false narrative that supports his abuser client in getting away with it. And I'm like, phew. Now, not only am I like that, because to me, I can't even imagine being such a horrific piece of shit. Like, I literally can't imagine it. I can't. I don't even know how these people look themselves in the mirror. I just don't. I would never be able to. I would cover every mirror in my fucking house. But, so not only that, but here's the thing. He's allowed to keep doing this. So I'm literally on the phone as the victim. This guy is like, if you can imagine in your mind the most sleazeball, just gross, like that ick, almost like a worse than a Better Call Saul image of just this disgusting sleazeball defense attorney that would do anything for a quick buck. That's this guy. So I'm on the phone. I'm in the courtroom virtually because I wasn't going to go out there. It's a safety issue. Like, I'm not going to go where my abuser is and be like, hey, here I am. Like, why don't you finish the job you started? So I'm in the court. I'm on the call. Well, so is my nonprofit attorney, who was incredible, and my nonprofit advocate, who was incredible, and my court advocate, who was also incredible. And they're literally messaging me, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. I know this is ridiculous. We know the facts. You know the facts. We've seen the evidence. We know this is ridiculous. Try to stay calm. Now, the thing is in my videos, I'm quite animated. That's just how I am naturally. I'm very animated. I make a lot of facial expressions. I'm very sarcastic. But I can't show that, right? Because what does that do? That fits their narrative. So I can't show that I'm upset because they'll use that against me. So even though it is well within my right to be upset, it is well within my right to cry, it is well within my right to be angry, not only as a victim, a survivor of DVIPV and near murder, but also as a person. But you're not allowed to be a person in a courtroom. Now, mind you, my abuser has literally yelled at a female magistrate in court, has text messaged at the table in court, has literally, like, not followed a single court order, right? So, like, he can do that, and that's okay, right? Like, I called this out. He can do that, and that's okay. But God bless America, I better not show any emotion whatsoever. So I sit there, stoic, barely making facial expressions to the best of my ability and holding it in while this sleazeball attorney just trying to, pay his, super nice sports car, blah, 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 who himself is a criminal, a convicted criminal for withholding evidence, says all this shit. And I had to sit there and take it. And it was allowed. Now, do I think that the judge would have stopped it if she could? Yeah, I do, actually. I do think that. I absolutely believe the judge did what she could. And why do I believe that? Because after the defense attorney, it must have gone on. It went on for like at least 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. I don't know how long it went on for, but it felt like forever. But afterwards, she ends up going into the law that kind of could be referenced, you know, the case, I can't remember what they call it, but like the case thing where it's like people versus blah, 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 blah. And that's used to give an example of how the law is allowed to be upheld or should be upheld. And so she goes into, you know, people versus Liechtenstein and how, you know, if she could, you know, address these things, she could reject, but unfortunately she can't, and, you know, whatever. So she goes through literally a real-time analysis of this case. And in the end, it ends up getting accepted. And the motion to dismiss is granted by the judge, is granted by the court, and his record is subsequently sealed. Now, doing that real-time analysis showed that she knew what was going on, and she had looked into it, and she was doing her best, but she didn't have what was needed. And unfortunately, because of the way the laws are and the rules are, I couldn't give any more. I couldn't do anything. I was literally stuck, and I couldn't say anything. And it was just this most ridiculous experience. So in the end, once everything was said and done and she finished, the motion was granted, and all the like legalese things were said to end the hearing, I think spoke out of turn, but as respectfully as I possibly could. And I can't remember exactly what I said, but I said something to the effect of, I am not arguing the decision of the court because that's not appropriate for me. What I will say is the information provided by District Attorney blah 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 and Defense Attorney Mr. blah 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 is not actually fully accurate and omits the fact that there was an adult witness present. But guess what? It didn't change anything. So not only as a victim survivor do I not have any control over my fate or over that of my abuser or whatever, they get to cherry pick what they want to do with it. And like I said, this DA then ended up leaving his term early a month later. And from what I have come to understand, the DA's office and the court continues to be immensely corrupt. And unfortunately, while the criminal side of things is done, I'm still being raped through the same court on the domestic civil side to continue protecting my son. And so I continue to have to pay attorney's fees because despite the fact that he was founded in 2 different states for child abuse and neglect, despite the fact that he has a prior DV conviction on his record, and then 3 years later was being charged with felony assault domestic violence, the fact that, you know, despite the fact that he had violated all of these protection orders and all, you know, everything repeatedly, that he didn't pass, he was unsuccessfully discharged from DV remediation treatment. The fact that he did not test for drugs and alcohol like he was supposed to, all of these things, despite it all, he still, almost 2 years later, gets to continue to rake me through the court system, and I'm continuously put in the position where I have to fight to protect my child. Now you tell me how that is justice. I don't think it is. Anyway, I appreciate you if you made it to the end of this video. Again, please like, share, subscribe, comment, and otherwise we will continue on so that we can, as I said in my statement, turn more victims into survivors. My goal being to turn all victims into survivors permanently. I appreciate you being here. Let's save some lives together. Thank you.